Fine, call me right-wing. For years, I've aggressively rejected the label of conservative and right-wing, not only because it was being used as a smear in elite discourse, but also because it doesn't accurately reflect how I think. My political journey is best summarized by this cartoon from my friend Colin Wright at Reality's Last Stand. That said, being right-wing was never a term of insult to me because it has never occurred to me that half of every country in the world is evil. What, we should demonize anyone who's on the right? Really? How carefully have you thought about this? How many woke people do you really think there are in the US Marine Corps or in the British SAS? What, we're going to pretend that the men and women who defend our country have nothing to offer it when it comes to values, mindset, and worldview? And yet, the consensus opinion in the barracks is the worst possible opinion you can have if your job is to tell people what to think on TV every night. Really? You know which other professions lean right? Engineers, farmers, business owners, the people who build the buildings we live in, grow the food we eat, and create jobs for most of us. They have nothing to offer? Surgeons, to whom we pay a lot of money because we entrust them with cutting our loved ones open with a knife in order to save their lives, they have nothing of value to offer our society? Really? I never thought of the term right-wing as an insult because I didn't regard being right-wing as a bad thing. That's also how I have always thought about the left. Both sides of the political spectrum have valuable instincts that need to be incorporated into our public policy to create a harmonious society, right? How naive I was. As my profile began to grow, so did the questions of, but are you right-wing though? I quickly deduced from the tone and body language that the question wasn't exactly being posed with an open-minded curiosity. This was a trap designed to give the listener an excuse to ignore what I was saying. All I had to do was confess my right-wingness, and everything I did and said would suddenly become tainted. Ooh, right-wing. This started with free speech, of course. This value, which the left had fought for most of my adult life, was suddenly, to my great surprise, a right-wing talking point. I wonder what comedian George Carlin, a hero of mine, who spent most of his career mocking religious conservatives, would make of this, given that he had himself arrested under obscenity laws in 1972 for performing a routine called 7 words you can never say on television. Then I discovered that being patriotic was right-wing. When I used to do stand-up, I'd often joke that I love this country and I say so publicly, which is how you know I haven't integrated. It always got what comedians proudly call laughter of recognition in woke comedy clubs up and down Britain. But I do love this country. I want the country I raise my children in and the civilization it's part of to be good, and I recognize that it is good. Not because I think it's perfect, but because I've experienced the alternative. And then there was immigration. The position which had always been held by all sane people everywhere suddenly became controversial. Apparently, wanting to make sure that people who came to your country did so legally was racist. As someone who did come to this country legally, that's just insane. Countries need borders. This isn't controversial, but now it is right-wing. Over time, I became increasingly defensive when people asked me whether I was on the right. But after spending 2 weeks on each side of the election in the United States, I just don't care anymore. I was at the Trump event in Madison Square Garden, which was roundly described as a Nazi rally. I did not go there with my MAGA hat and pom-poms. I went there to see it with my own eyes as an independent journalist. You've probably read or watched my satirical take on what I saw there. But in all seriousness, the gap between the media lies and reality was too big for me to leave the event unchanged. What affected me most was not what I saw, it was what I didn't see. I didn't see racism. Well, an edgy comedian made some jokes and the media said he made racist remarks, but there was no actual racism. I didn't see an angry mob. To my British eye, it looked more like a WWE event. Political entertainment. The people who were there didn't agree with the comedian's racist comments. It's just that, unlike journalists, they know the difference between comments and jokes. I saw none of what I'd been promised, and that was eye-opening. It's difficult to communicate what this is like to someone who hasn't experienced it, but the nearest I can get to it is this photograph. Look at it. Does the man in the middle look like he thinks the man on the left is a Nazi whose supporters are garbage. And yet that is exactly what he said a week before the election. My point is, the media lies weren't exaggerations. They were just lies. And seeing is believing. But most of all, what I saw in America was choice. You could vote for more of the same, or you could vote for someone who would come in and actually do something. Unlike the British Conservative Party, which spent 14 years being woke before limping out of office, handing an even more woke Labour Party a gigantic parliamentary majority, the American right isn't messing around. You may hate Trump's appointees, but you can't argue they don't represent a break from business as usual. You think the military is going to be woke under former Army National Guard officer Pete Hegseth? How do you think DEI is going to fare under Elon and Vivek? Do you think Tom Homan, former acting director of Immigration and Customs Enforcement, is going to keep the border open? Trump's appeal is not that he is a steady hand who will maintain the country's stable and positive trajectory. It's that he represents an opportunity to avert disaster. And the truth is, as I've been warning for some time, that is exactly what the West is on course for if we don't change direction. I didn't know how exactly I'd feel when Trump was elected. Turns out, I was relieved. This is not incompatible with being a centrist or a radical moderate or an independent. But the luxury of nuance lasts only until the day of the election, the one day that actually matters. The world of many shades of grey becomes black and white inside the voting booth. So I will maintain my intellectual independence. I'm too disagreeable not to. But after what the Democrats tried to pass off as presidential material in the last election, and the way that Starmer's government is about to nosedive the British economy, it's time to acknowledge that the left is asking all the wrong questions and has none of the answers. As journalist Josh Barrow hilariously observed 2 weeks ago, the Democrats were the party which committed itself to transgender surgeries for illegal aliens and then failed to actually perform any. If opposing this insanity makes me right-wing, so be it. Ultimately, the choice is between civilization and people who think men can give birth. Everything else is fluff.